tested to see if color had an influence on the human perception of taste. Most girls preferred pink and red, and boys it was a little more sporadic and less focused. We thought that the warmer colors and warmer and brighter colors that were associated with like candies or sweet fruits and things would be more popular, and that for the most part that's what we found, and that the cooler colors such as like purple or brown wouldn't be as popular, and that was also true. It was just pretty interesting to see how the transmission of signals and the senses can be altered just based on like trickery and things.
In high school, it's a big problem with people drawing on your stuff. You know, someone came home and drew on my lucky rock, so I needed to find something to get rid of it. So we tested vinegar, rubbing alcohol, Clorox, and Windex on stone and wood. Tell me about we found that bleach worked the best to remove Sharpie. Rubbing alcohol worked pretty well. Vinegar and Windex didn't work that well. I'm going to use Sharpie more because it's kind of hard to get rid of, and I'm going to bleach all my clothes.
I cut flatworms, which are they're planarian, a type of flatworm, into 3 different parts, and they regrew into 3 separate organisms. And I saw how temperature affected that. The higher the temperature, the faster it regrew. It was like my exact hypothesis.
All right, so our project is about, we did a coffee experiment, and we put up a sign with a picture of eyes next to the coffee machine and asking for a $1 donation when you get a coffee. And we alternated each week with a sign with the eyes and a sign with the flowers to see whether it would affect how much money we would earn and if people would get the sense that they're being watched. And it was kind of like an honesty experiment, along with the feeling of if the eyes did affect their actions or not. Our hypothesis was correct.
Yeah, our hypothesis was generally correct. We guessed well. Yeah.
We found that when we had the sign with the eyes, we got a 10.81% increase in money. So we concluded that people felt the need to be more honest with the sign with the eyes.
There was not really a way to keep tabs on exactly how many coffees were taken, but there's the same amount of workers each week in this office, so we kind of, that was one of our possible errors, that we're not exactly sure how many. But yeah, it was $87 and $95 for the 2 weeks that the flowers was there, and $100 and $103 for the weeks that the sign with the eyes was there.
My project was to test the relative safety of cell phones using a microwave leakage detector, and it detects microwaves, which is the same type of radiation released by microwaves and by cell phones. So I just tested which cell phone was safer. I found that the BlackBerry is the least safe, followed by iPhone, and then these other 3 phones were safer. I thought that the iPhone and the BlackBerry would be the safest, seeing as though they're more technologically advanced and more expensive. I thought that there would be more testing going into them, but I was pretty surprised to find that that was not the case.
We're testing whether the color of something affects how people smell it, and we found that that is the case. And yeah, we learned that the color of something does affect how you smell it.
Our project was called What Are Your Tensions? Because we're in physics right now, we're learning about how velocity, kinetic energy, and tension is affected to one another. So we decided to test all of them out. So basically our problem was which fluid creates the greater change in water surface, and then which raft is more stable, and is size a factor. And then we hypothesized that.
We hypothesized that the detergent would be the liquid that would propel the little boats that we made a lot faster, because it's a lot denser than hand soap, olive oil, or table salt mixed with water. So
Yeah, and then also we decided that the pointier the raft, as well as the size, we thought smaller would be better too, just because of weight and mass. So we decided that because you know how like on a boat you have bows are usually pointed, so then that's why we came to the conclusion that we predicted that it would help the raft push and pull the water away from the raft, causing it to move faster. So, but then we found out that we were partially right because detergent was the best fluid in creating the motor to go faster. So, but the only thing was the raft that worked the best was this one, because I think it's because it was the different divots that helped propel the water away from the raft as well. Oh, sorry. And that's what basically we found out. But the thing was, there was a lot of room for possible error throughout the whole experiment because, I mean, someone might have timed it differently. Maybe there's too many drops of the actual liquid. So, I mean, there's a lot that could have been improved, but for a first-time project, it was very successful.
For my project, I studied the effect of temperature change on the acoustical signature of cavitation. What cavitation is when water moves, the pressure in the water is decreased to the point where gases that are suspended in the water can come out of suspension, forming a bubble. When that bubble reaches an area of higher pressure, it collapses and forms sound. If you look here, these are some pictures of cavitation coming off of the end of this propeller. Now, cavitation, when the bubbles collapse, it produces sound, and that sound can be measured using a hydrophone. What the Navy does is it uses passive sonar to identify the signatures of ships, because every ship produces cavitation in a unique way, and thus is its own signature, and the Navy can identify any ship if they have its signature on file from what they record using sonar. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to see if there was an effect based on temperature change from that on that acoustical signature of the cavitation. So to do that, I used a hydrophone and the propeller coupled with a motor to produce cavitation in a tank at several different temperatures. And what I found was that there seemed to be a slight change at higher temperatures, but at lower temperatures, it was more in line with the sound of the motor itself. So there appeared to be a change in the acoustical signature based on temperature. However, the change was slight, and due to a lot of possible error associated with the experiment, including just the pure sound of the drill, that was impossible to contain. Further study would need to be done in order to further form a definitive statement from the results of this project. However, the data that I did gather is supported by the math of cavitation, where with a higher temperature, because of the factors that play into cavitation, you should be able to, there should be more cavitation and thus a different acoustic signature. So I have samples of the drill when it wasn't cavitating, but being able to kind of cancel it out or be able to somehow enclose the drill in a soundproof container or something like that would help. Also, being able to, instead of testing in a tank, being able to test in a low pressure environment would help spur on the production of cavitation and make it easier for further testing.
So the three of you did this?
Yes.
Yeah. What grade are you guys in?
10th grade.
All right. So tell me, what do you got here? What did you decide? What you try to do?
We produced
Speak into the mic here.
We produced biodiesel.
Cool thing?
Yeah, we produced
Embarrass you later.
we produced biodiesel out of 4 different base oils, and then we tested different aspects of the oils to see how what we used as a base oil actually affected the aspects that we tested, which were burn length.
So was the experiment to turn the oil into a biodiesel, or are you just using the oil?
No, we created biodiesel by using.
You had to alter the oils?
Yeah.
We had to mix the oils with a substance called sodium methoxide, which is a mixture of lye and methanol. And so, yeah. So we had to heat the oil, and then we had to heat the oil and mix it with the sodium methoxide, and that reaction separates the combustible material from the glycerin,
which
You were doing
can
this in a chemistry lab?
Yeah.
I'm happy to
yeah,
hear that.
very dangerous stuff. But so we had to let
This one's it's funny.
the solid objects settle out, and so then when they're separated out,
Solids?
The glycerin, yeah, I think it's the ones, but which fuel it was, but the glycerin would pool into like a really thick substance at the bottom, and then we filtered it
it's
out.
almost like a jello.
Yeah.
Did you do this all at the same, all 3 oils or 4 oils at the same time?
Yeah, basically, we didn't have enough hot plates to do all of them at the
Right.
exact same time, but we did them, I think, in groups of 2,
You didn't
and then
blow
we.
anything up?
No, we set a lot of things on fire, quite a few things on
Everything's
fire.
flammable, you know?
Yeah, and so we produced the biodiesel, and you have to let it sit for a couple of days for the glycerin to actually filter out, and then we filtered it again just to make it more pure, because the purer it is, the cleaner it will burn. So
Did you put it in any engines?
we
Did it
couldn't,
work?
because the one diesel engine that we had easy access to, because it's not
You
actually
said, no, I'm not. You put that
Oh
in the
yeah,
engine.
no one wanted it in their engine because it's not like commercially produced.
Right,
It's
right.
still got a decent amount of
Won't hurt
glycerin
the
in it.
teeth.
I mean,
It wouldn't.
No, it's
It would've
15
burned.
grand. Who cares?
yeah.
No. Well, anyways, when did you start working on this?
We started about 3 weeks ago.
We
Because
actually started a little bit after.
Well, you must have started talking about it like after Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then finally, oh my God, it's next week.
You know, we'd
Yeah,
go in and we'd get some class time to do it, but then you wouldn't really have enough time to actually put them together and let it settle out. And so you have to let it settle for a couple days before you can start filtering it again. So it's a very time-consuming process, and I think that played a lot into
And I'm
how
looking-
long
I'm
it
reading
took.
here- I'm listening to as I'm looking at the conclusion. So what did you conclude? Well, is making biodiesel something that somebody should try on Nantucket?
on place on Nantucket is slightly better, but biodiesel isn't
Cost
really.
too much just to get the oil.
Yeah, it's not really a viable. It
Right.
like our cheapest oil I think was $2.25 for corn oil, and that was a quart of it. So it's at this point it's still not really viable unless you're buying in bulk, and even then it's.
What is diesel fuel now? Like $4.89 or something a gallon?
Yeah, it's getting up there, but it's still not. It's still much
So would you
cheaper
do this
to.
again? I mean,
Um,
you learned
yeah.
a lot, right?
Oh yeah,
I think it would be interesting
It's a
actually.
it's a nice looking project. I think you did all right.
Yeah.
It's good.
and it's something we can actually apply in the real world, so it's kind of cool.
Well, I was basically studying the effects of sea level rise on populations, especially in New England. I looked at Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, Nantucket, and Boston. Nantucket and Boston just as closer looks at the general thing. I used these images from Google Maps, which were generated by a program that shows approximate sea level rise over certain meter levels. And then I calculated these with census data. I went through and looked at the areas that would be underwater, and the census data was then compiled into these statistics here. I also broke it down by race for each increment of sea level rise in Massachusetts. And then this is a percentage graph that shows what percentage of the population in a certain administrative area would be displaced with certain sea level rises. Obviously, places like Nantucket aren't going to do as well, while places that are higher up would be better. Massachusetts would have approximately 68.5% of its population displaced. That's an estimate just given, that's in a 60-meter sea level rise scenario. That's an estimate given calculations based on census data, but because of marshy areas and brackish semi-coastal areas, it's hard to project exactly what it would be like. A 2-meter rise is the current projection, and even that shows substantial damage to Nantucket in town, in Nantucket, and along the north coast. Ultimately, most of the Cape and Islands in a higher sea level rise scenario would be submerged. Even places as far inland as Springfield, Amherst, cities like Greenfield would be affected due to the fact that the Connecticut River Valley would flood. Now, my conclusion was mostly based on some some of this is preventable. For instance, stopping Springfield and cities like that from being affected would just be a matter of putting up a seawall along the Connecticut River. But some of it, obviously, you couldn't block this whole coast, and because of that, it's a very difficult scenario, and due to current considerations, it's unlikely in the extreme that we would be able to avert any all sea level rise, so we just kind of have to do what we can. Thanks.
All right, our experiment is Lie to Me. Our hypothesis is, given the resources available to high school students or the general public, are we able to establish if adults are lying? We establish a control and ask a series of questions to different adult teachers, because through our research we found out that teachers are the #1 professions where people lie in, even above lawyers and everything else. And firefighters are the least likely to lie. So we decided to ask all the teachers, because we have teachers all around us to help us with all of this. So we asked 5 female teachers and 5 male teachers a series of control questions. Simple ones where it's like, what's your name? Where were you born? Where city did you grow up in? Like all sorts of questions like that. And then once we did that, we recorded it with our laptop. And then we asked them another series of questions, but this time we asked them to lie on one. Now, when they lied, we told them that there was 10 questions. We didn't know which one. We told them they could lie on any one. We had no idea which one they lied on. So after we recorded that, in the end, everyone lied at least once. And then we had follow-up questions like, we'd ask them, what's their favorite, do you play a sport? Or do you have a favorite sport? And then we'd have follow-up questions like, what's your favorite team? Who's your favorite player? And they'd have to lie on those follow-up ones. So we ended up watching each control video for like an hour each live video for an hour each. We spent 2 hours on each person, 20 hours of just going through, watching our teachers. It was a fun time. And we ended up finding a change in each person's behavior. Some were really obvious, like giggling or just loss of knowledge. Like we asked one person when their birthday was, and as a follow-up question, they couldn't answer when their horoscope sign was. But on others, they didn't move, but some people had like a little voice change, like they went up an octave and went down. You couldn't even tell the difference unless you were watching it for 30 hours or like 20 hours. So we went through, we did each teacher. We were 100% effective with our data. We found all the micro expressions it was amazing. We think it's luck because honestly, there's a huge margin of error. We tried to control it as much as possible by making the classroom clear out, like all the kids would be gone. They would end up staring at a wall or at us, most of the time the wall, because they were probably scared of us knowing what their lie was. It was a fun experiment. We got a lot of good data, and we realized that there's so much available resources and so much information available to all of us students and everyone else, and from that we're able to know really cool things like lying, an in-depth thing into like a human psyche. So yeah.
For our project we learned what color light plants grow the best under, and to do that we put plants in different colored shoe boxes which had different colored light sources, and we did white, red, orange, green, and blue. And we discovered that the orange light grew the best, but the red also did well. And then it was the white, then the green, and the blue did the worst. It didn't really, the plants kind of started to die at the end. And yeah. Well, I think maybe the orange and the red work better because they're warmer colors, whereas the blue is like darker and seems like plants would want more light. So
my project's about artificial light and sunlight. It's to see if plants grow different in artificial light or sunlight. It depends because my artificial lit plant grew taller than my sunlit plant. I think because in the past few days we had a lot of clouds and it's been pretty cloudy outside, and so the sunlit plant didn't get as much sun as it was supposed to get, I guess. But yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. So basically what we did was we wanted to determine find out what the pH levels, the pH levels of certain consumer products. That we use shampoos, soaps, and vinegar, and with red cabbage broth. So basically, our first step was to boil this red cabbage right here.
Yeah.
For about 10 minutes. Then we cooled it overnight because you don't want to use it hot. Then we took out 7 pH solutions, spaced between the pH levels of 2 and 11. We poured 2 milliliters of each pH solution into each design test tube. Then we added 2 milliliters of the red cabbage broth in the test tubes as well. We shook it to determine the color. And just a note, we were going to redo it if the color changed significantly. Then we got 4 more test tubes, and we had Axe shampoo, Hollister shampoo, soft soap, and vinegar. And what we did was we diluted it. What dilution is to make an acid weaker by adding water. So basically, we added 2 milliliters of that solution into each test tube. Then we added 2 milliliters of the red cabbage broth into the test tubes. And basically what we did first to determine what the pH was, we took the test tube and basically, determined what color it was or what pH by the color. But that's proved to have a lot of significant human errors, of course, because of, just human error.
Yeah.
But when we used the pH indicator strip, it diminished the possibility of human error significantly. And what we found out that vinegar, of course, was the most acidic pH, and both of the shampoos and soap had a pH level of 5. All of them to be acidic, which proved our hypothesis, that the vinegar would be the most acidic, while the soap and shampoos would be more basic. So that's basically what our experiment was.
He basically said it all, In terms of participation, it was me, Jake Adams, and Joe Turner just walked away right there. But yeah, so pretty much that's what we did. And he's the mastermind beyond it all. Well, in terms of human error, we use tap water, so it's a little bit acidic. So that's the only thing really that he kind of left out. But for the most part, he covered all of it. Thank you.
I tested the effects of peppermint on mental concentration and athletic performance. I got the idea from this theory that the menthol and peppermint is supposed to increase both of these. And I took it a step further to see if it would change the effects in boys and in girls based on the chemical composition of the different brains. And apparently, it does improve athletic performance more in boys and mental concentration more in girls. As you can see here, changed a lot for the boys. I had them run about 30 meters to test the athletic performance, and I timed them to see how long it would take. And for the boys, the average time went down a lot. I'm actually wondering if I messed up with some of the math there, because it's such a big jump. With the girls, though, it didn't change at all on average. Some of them improved and some of them didn't improve, and when it all averaged up, it stayed about the same. For girls, though, they definitely improved in the mental concentration. I expected most of it. I did expect the girls to improve more with the mental concentration, the boys to improve more with the athletic performance. But I'm kind of surprised what happened with the boys in the concentration test and the girls in the athletic performance test. I think it's because that the peppermint probably activated different parts of the brain for both.
We tested short-term memory, and we wanted to see whether people had better short-term memory with pictures that are colored or black and white. So we created a test with 15 colored pictures and 15 black and white pictures.
And we discovered that people did remember more colored than black and white, that was our hypothesis, because color is more engaging to the brain, and people can use the color to remember things. Like people remembered red apple or green bird, whereas black and white, they all look the same. And males remembered more than females, which was kind of surprising, and then adults remembered more than teens and children. It was really different from person to person what they forgot. Some people forgot things that you thought they would remember, like a student who's really smart forgot a book, or a woman who really liked animals forgot a dog. So.
My project was dealing with how the geological makeup of Nantucket Island affects erosion. And so basically, historically, as we know, Nantucket's created by a glacier. Glacier comes down eventually, whether it's the rise in temperature, the glacier reaches glacial standstill. So glacier's not moving. The rate of melt is higher than its movement forward. So it stops. All that stuff that pushes in front of it is the moraine. As the glacier melts, all that water from the glacier washes over the moraine and washes all the less heavy material out across, and that's what creates the rest of the island. That's called the outwash plain. And so basically my hypothesis was that since the northeast side of the island is heavier material, clay, larger rock, that's going to erode less fast than the south shore, where it's this outwash plain, less clay, small pebbles and gravel. So it's not only the exposure to the open ocean and the hurricanes and swell and whatnot, but also just its geological makeup is what has caused all the heavy erosion on the south shore. And it was fairly conclusive that was it. A good sign of that was how Sconset, even though we hear a lot about it eroding, which the coastal erosion is not as high as the cliff erosion. The cliff's just trying to reach equilibrium to a point where grasses can grow again. But the coast is not eroding as much, even though it is exposed to the ocean, as is the south shore, and yet it's closer to the moraine, so it has heavier material, more clay. But the others do not.